So good morning, everyone. I would like first to thank Cristina for this invitation. It's always a big pleasure to be with these friends of mine, but also with all of you. The events that FAPESP, it's better like that, yeah? The events that FAPESP put together, like this one, I find amazing, something that we don't see everywhere in the world, and it's always a fantastic opportunity to get together, to learn from one another. And I've been here for a day only, and it's been already a journey. It feels like I've been here for a week or so. And I'm sure, since I know that you guys have been here for about 10 days, I'm sure that you guys must be tired, a kind of good tiredness, I bet. For this reason, I decided to bring something, this talk. I hope it's going to be relaxing, most of all, since I think you guys deserve it. And my friends asked me to talk to you about transformative change, which I think is a new buzzword in our field. And I will try to connect that with the kind of work that we are doing at the Museum of Tomorrow, especially with this UNESCO chair. And Cristina has specifically asked me to talk about three parts. I have recently published a book on what we call regenerative dialogues. And basically what I'm going to talk to you about today here is three parts of the book. We talk a little bit about sustainability as utopia. Then I'll talk a little bit about regeneration itself and how it relates to futures. And then finally, I will talk about communication and outreach, especially through education. But to start, I think IPBES is very always concerned with definitions, and I try to pick one for transformative change. And IPBES defines transformative change as a fundamental system-wide reorganization across technological, economic, and social factors, including paradigms, goals, and values. When I see this definition, and I think it's a pretty good one, at the same time I feel that it's a subject talking about an object. It's almost as if we are not necessarily part of that. One I like more about transformative change comes from Salvador Dali, and when he painted Metamorphoses of Narcissus in 1937, he came up with a text to accompany it. And the text goes like that. There remains of him Narcissus, only his head, chrysalis of hidden biological designs. When that head slits, when that head splits, when that head bursts, it will be the flower, the new Narcissus. Metamorphosis, or this transformative change Narcissus went through, is an inner transformation. It's inside. And I often have the impression that a number of goals that we are setting to ourselves in the planet, or we expect to see in the planet as if the planet was an object, if we don't undergo transformation in our own behavior, that's not going to happen. And I think we don't talk about that enough. And what I brought you today is a lot about inner transformation for transformative change in a planetary sense. And then there's another painting that I like very much. Hugo Simberg is a Finnish painter, painting from the beginning of the 20th century. And I think the common reading of this painting is that you see an angel here. The angel is wounded, and some read it as a message of precaution. That if you fly too high in your dreams, things may go wrong. So some interpret this little guy here wearing black as death, and some others say that this guy here in the back, looking at us very seriously, is saying, see, if you try to fly too high, you may end up being wounded. I have another reading of this, I find it actually a very optimistic painting. What it tells me is that we can dream high, and things may go wrong. But whenever they go wrong, there's people that are going to help us. It always strikes me that the angel is blindfolded. And that suggests to me a balance, the balance of justice. So the present is like that. The angel is wounded, no hope. You see the flowers, these are snowdrops, a flower that's a symbol of hope. It's like that, it's not doing very well. But there's hope here on the ground. And I think this painting is a lot less about what's here, but what about what is here, what's going to come next. And I see this as a journey towards justice and balance. And justice and balance can be, I guess, a little bit about sustainability. And sustainability, in the Latin origin, the word sustentare means to take care. So I think sustainability is an ethic of care. Some can call it SDG, or ESG, or CSR, and all these different formulas that you get for sustainability, but deep down, is about taking care of the planet, about taking care of other beings, and taking care of ourselves. But if this place here, where these guys are going to go to, is a sustainable place, what is this sustainability? I tend to think that sustainability is our modern utopia. Perhaps the latest, the 21st century utopia. Expressed as a common desire by the UN in the Sustainable Development Goals, for instance. But before we go into that, I want to talk to you a little bit about the word utopia. It's a word that's very dear to me because it was born in Brazil, believe it or not. It's a book written by Thomas More in 1516. This book was based on a letter that Americo Vespucci has written while visiting this part of the world here, the coast, somewhere between São Sebastião and the Guanabara Bay. Mais perto, tá ok. Porque aqui fica tão alto, vou tentar ficar um pouco mais para cá. So, somewhere between where we are and Guanabara Bay, by the coast, I like the Guanabara Bay version better because it's where I was born. He wrote this letter to the Portuguese Empire saying that what he saw here, the Atlantic forest and the Tupinambá people, gave him the impression that these people who lived here, they loved nature, they loved one another because they made parties every day, and they loved themselves individually because the Tupinambá, and he said in the letter, todas as pessoas de e do outro sexo andam nuas. All people from both sexes, they go without clothes every day. That for him, imagine 16th century Europe, everybody full of clothes. For him, that was a measure of self-love. So it's a beautiful letter called Mundos Novos, the New World. So America is the New World, not because it was the last piece of geography to be found by the Europeans, but it's a world of hope. Novelty could emerge from here, perhaps from what America saw in our indigenous people. And then this continent is called America by the Europeans. And as a kid, I always wondered why it was not Colombia or Cabralia, but it's America because of the letter. The letter, for me, is the greatest utopia of the past 500 years. And it has taken different shapes. And of course, the letter is a bit of a mystery. And I think what Thomas More does when he calls it utopia, topos in Greek means place, and the U is a bit of a mystery. Because if it is utopia, is the true place or the good place. But it could also be utopia. Utopia is the no place. So what is the utopia? What is this future that we desire? Is it a good place? Or is it a state? It's a no place. It's something that merges, a state of things. And I think that in modernity, the future became a measure of success, became a place. Maybe to have, nice bank account, a car, a house, perhaps a family. That's a measure of success. So that can be utopia for some. Now, the utopia does not have a specific target. It's something that emerges and emerges out of your actions and the collective actions. So it's a very different way of perceiving the future. And the future, I keep telling my students, and Victoria hears that every day, the future does not exist. The future only exists in our imagination. And that's why utopias are so important, because they move us forward. Right? There's a Brazilian writer that I strongly recommend. He's called Guimarães Rosa. And Guimarães Rosa says in one of his books that the main character is going to cross a river, and he's here, right? There's a river here, and he wants to get there where the camera is. And then he thinks, well, I always want to get to one specific point there, the other side. But I never get there. I get a little bit over there, depends on the current, depends if there are rocks or trunks along the way, but I never get to that specific point, but that doesn't matter. And then he says, in life, we care too much about where we depart and where we arrive. But the life is in the crossing. And this notion of crossing is where, I guess, transformation lies. And that's the sustainable, I'm sorry, it's in Portuguese, the sustainable development goals, I'm sure you guys are all aware of that. That's, let's call it the 21st century utopia, at least until 2030. Or actually, until September this year, it's going to begin to change. There's going to happen a summit of the future in the UN headquarters in New York, early September. And the letter is being drafted. You can find the draft already on the web. And this letter is going to inspire a new set of goals, since these ones clearly we did not achieve, and there's no way we're going to achieve them by 2030. Actually, things are getting worse. Irrespective of that, this type of goals, which I find important and inspiring anyway, they are a blueprint utopia. They are like a map. Things you got to do to get to a given state or place. So blueprints utopia have been out there forever, right? And they are not always necessarily inclusive of all the diversity of beings, not only people, that we have in the planet. So visions of sustainability, they are diverse. And what I wanted basically to show you that here we have the SDG, right? And when you look at nature, social, and individual, the SDG talks about protecting nature, social is about development, and the individual component that's not very present in the IDG is very much about living. So nature as something we relate to, we are part of, the cultural aspects of the social, and the individual component of being rather than living are definitely not present there. They are present, however, in the inner development goals. I don't know if you've heard of that. The inner development goals are inner and interpersonal objectives that if these guys think that if we don't become better people, we are never going to achieve the SDG. So, but the IDG, they are only about that, about the inner and interpersonal component of being. Degrowth, which is an alternative view to sustainable development, also very much lies in the top part here, but it includes cultural aspects. When we look at Buen Vivir from our Andean neighbors here, Buen Vivir as a way of living pretty much covers all aspects. Currently, there's been launched objectives of Buen Vivir. There are 18 of them. Of course, I think as idea is to promote some kind of dialogue with the Sustainable Development Goals, and they are pretty interesting. Ubuntu from Sub-Saharan Africa has lessons rather than objectives. There are 16 lessons, and they very much are around the more inner dimensions of life. So it seems to me that SDG did not pay too much attention or did not dialogue with any of that. When you look at Objective 8, which is of economic growth, it's exactly the opposite of what the degrowth people have been talking about. And this economic growth does not seem to matter much to some of the Buen Vivir or to the Ubuntu logic. So why is it that we have to grow economically? Who said so? How many times we did that in history? What's the result? With most of the wealth of the planet concentrated in the hands of a few. Is this being discussed here? I guess not. It's a premise. We start from the premise that we need to continually grow economically. So there's a whole problem with that. It's not my particular utopia, and I bet not of many of you, for that to happen, or especially not in the way it has been done in the past 300 years. So that's why I like so much the open utopias. Open utopias are utopias that they are not concerned with the place of arrival, especially because this future state does not exist. Open utopias are about the present. And I'm going to show you a few. I like very much the Utopia of Love of Emmanuel Levinas, which is about embracing the other. Alterity, it has implications for justice. Basically what Levinas says is that if we love ourselves and if we love one another and if we love nature, all is going to be fine. There's no problem. If there's love in the world, everything is going to work. Doesn't matter if it's capitalism or communism or whatever. Love would do it. Zygmunt Bauman talks about the liquid utopia, which I also like a lot. What Bauman says is that if we meet our desires democratically, all is going to be fine. If we put the two together, if we are loving and democratic, and I don't mean the democracy of voting, of all this political logic that we know, but democracy in the true sense of the word, of power to the people. If we are loving and democratic, I bet all is going to be fine. And I like very much Ernst Bloch. For me, this is one of the most interesting one. He talks about a concrete utopia. Utopia, that I've been called utopic so many times in my life, so I thought it was a bit of a problem. But utopia is the most pragmatic thing that there is. And I tell you, to dream, there's nothing more practical and objective than to dream. Because the pragmatic of utopia lies in the sense that, I bet today, you guys wake up, after 10 days here, you are tired, you learned a lot, it's been great, you met a lot of people, but you are tired. But then you say, you wake up, perhaps you went late to bed tonight, you are definitely going to go late to bed, there's carnival, there's party, and then you wake up in the next day, say, oh my God, I'm a bit tired, final day, but then you say, yeah, I'm going to be up, and I'm going to be a little bit better at least than I was yesterday. This that makes you do the next thing, to wake up, to stand up and face your day-to-day routine and try to improve, that's what utopia is about. It is inside you. Like the word tomorrow, I was just telling Chris, tomorrow is not someplace in the future. The tomorrow is inside you. It's a beautiful word. It's about hope, but an active hope. It's not hope in the sense of waiting, but hope in the sense of moving towards action or inaction. It's about taking decisions, about taking risks. And Bloch says that utopia is this permanent, constant state of not yet. Life isn't finished. We are unfinished. The universe is unfinished. Reality is unfinished. And we aim for an end. We want sustainability to be some kind of state that we grab it. We are not going to be able to grab it. It's continuous. It's a continuous state of not yet. So sustainability, therefore, is a compass, right? Is some kind of, is the other side of the river, as Guimarães Rosa says. It's not to be something to be achieved, but it's something to drive our day-to-day action. So we can talk about utopian pragmatism, which is this that I'm talking about. You know, it's an everyday thing. But there's the utopian realism. And the utopian realists, they're also very interesting, but they say, so for instance, the utopian realists often say that there are a few targets, that there are things that we got to do to the world to get better. So for instance, minimal wage, planetary minimum wage for everybody. Everybody gets at least a little bit of money, which I think is okay, some of these premises, but that starts from the principle that money is always going to be there. So our premises, they drive our future. Somehow, our present colonizes our future. We have a very hard time thinking of futures different from our present. And that, of course, requires imagination, which is where the future lies. It lies only inside our imagination. And then we have to enhance it in order to be able to imagine better futures. And then take home message number one. There are two more only after that, but this one is this. Sustainability as utopia will always remain as a state of not yet. It's to be approached pragmatically. It's something that one has to practice every day. And then gradually you can change the way you eat, you can change the way you transport yourselves. There are all these objective things, but most of all, if we try to become a little bit better as persons every day, I believe that this creates some kind of wave, and that, you know, may have something very good may emerge out of that. And then let's go to the second part. Then that's about what I'm calling regeneration. Hannah Arendt, German philosopher, said after the Second World War that that modern society alienated itself from the planet, from the world and from the planet. She wanted to say that at the time we started to look as to be interested in you know, the space traveling and all that, as if we were giving up on Earth and to think of other planets to live. But especially, she said, we disconnected from other people and from nature. And as doing that, we became less humans. We disconnected from ourselves. And alienation is followed by disenchantment. And Max Weber, in the beginning of the 20th century, he said, I think it's pretty hard what he said, but he said that science, industrialization, and bureaucracy disenchanted the world. We started to see the world as a machine and not as something organic. I think Weber was a bit unfair. I think it's less about science, industrialization, and bureaucracy, but it's more about perhaps scientists, industrialists, and bureaucrats. These are three ways of dealing with the world, and I think they are harmful. The way we use them is what can be harmful. So, and of course, with all this process of reducing the whole into parts, to try to understand the parts first, to then understand the whole, which is the scientific venture, the project that started with René Descartes, especially. This modularization of the whole creates fractures. So you can think of Gaia, of the wholeness of the planet, as being fractured. And then we talk about environment, social, and self as separate entities, the spirit, the mind, and the body, the past, the present, and the future, science, arts, and spirituality, traditional, modern, postmodern. We separate these things that really are together, and it affects our lives. I tell you myself, I'm about to complete 60 years of age. Up until I was 50, I thought there were three Fábios. There was scientist Fábio, artist Fábio, and spiritual Fábio. They didn't talk to one another. Especially in the science milieu, you don't see many scientific talks talking about love, for instance, as I just did. It doesn't show up so often in this environment. So somehow we drive ourselves, or we feel we are forced to separate these entities. It is very nice when we try to get them together, but it's a hard work. It's very difficult. We got used to have these entities separate. So if this is all separate, and if I'm correct in this assessment, we need to regenerate the fractures that separate these modules. And for that, Mario Bunge, Argentinian philosopher who was based in Canada, he passed away recently. He developed all this thinking about emergence, and he says that for the new to emerge, modules need to converge. And the convergence of modules is what I'm calling regeneration. Regeneration in the biological sense is the capacity of organisms and entire systems to self-reform. It's the capacity for self-reformation. If we think of the planet as a supra-organism, as a big, gigantic organism, this planet has the capacity to regenerate and to heal, because life regenerates, right? So I'm interested on how this might happen. I'm sure you're not going to be able to see that, but what this triangle represents, at the bottom here, we have such modules, right? So when we think of science, and you guys are doing that, natural sciences is one thing, social sciences is another one. And most of you, if not all of you, are now trying to put these things together. That leads to a sustainability science. But is that enough? Doesn't science need to talk to spirituality, to ancestral knowledge, as we did yesterday, to the arts? What is outside this triangle is about modernity. It's about what is relevant today to us here, is what the hegemonic state, let's say. What's outside, but this triangle has holes on it. And then it begins to dialogue with other forms of interpretation of reality, and the notion of sustainable development goal as blueprint utopia, perhaps can begin to dialogue with Ubuntu, with Bem Viver, with degrowth, eco-socialism, ecofeminism, and so on. And if this dialogue takes place, this separation, these fractures, they begin to regenerate, and they may lead us into a state of deeper sustainability. Regeneration for me then can take place both as mindset, but also as an emerging paradigm. The mindset that's very difficult, I find it still very, I'm telling you all that, some of it, I want to get there. It's still in process. I didn't achieve, I'm far from achieving it, but it's where I think utopia lies. So I think to develop a mindset where we feel that we are part of a whole, I find that super difficult. It's easy to talk about, but it's very difficult to really understand what means these connections and the interdependence of all life and non-life in this planet. Also, regeneration is also an emerging paradigm because all existing structures are collapsing. And we need to regenerate structures so that we have something stable to carry on. And then regeneration for me is about repairing relationships. So there are many reparations that have to be done with many different people in the world. It's about repairing systems because we have split. So how can you talk about a sustainable city if the neighboring city is not sustainable? How can you think of a sustainable house if your neighbor is not sustainable? How can your country be sustainable if you have 2-3 countries in the world that break record of greenhouse gas emission every year? Sustainability is a property of the whole. It's not of the parts. And of course, time as well. Our present is full of our past, and we are here imagining the future. All times, they are together in us. And reparation also of rights, of visions, realities, utopias that may be able to coexist. And then that brings me to another topic that's dear to me, that's anticipation. Anticipation is the way beings deal with the future. Every living being anticipates, right? When a bacteria moves from here to there, it does so because it's anticipating something. And we anticipate every time. Perhaps soon enough, not now, but soon enough, we're going to be thinking of the coffee break, what we're going to be eating there, right? And then lunch, and then carnival at night. Where all the time we are anticipating. And anticipation has also a biological definition to it. It's a characteristic of living beings related to metabolism, repair, again, and ultimately well-being. So anticipation and regeneration is a form of anticipation of life. And then for humans, we can talk about 3 types of anticipation. There is the conscious anticipation, we can call it like that. So forecasting and foresight, and we do a lot of that in our science, right? There are logical ways of projecting scenarios and dealing with the future. But there's also a more subconscious way of anticipating through intuition or instinct, things that you feel. But I'm particularly interested in these 3 final ones, the unconscious ways of anticipating. Stem cells are anticipatory systems. We don't know exactly where they are, how they do it, but if you get hurt, they are immediately going to begin to act, to heal you, right? Autopoiesis is another complex concept in biology. Started off with Umberto Maturana. Autopoiesis is this capacity of life of self-regulation. So life is always creating conditions for more life to appear. That's autopoiesis. And exaptation, this is a concept developed by Stephen Jay Gould. That's pretty complicated, but trying to put it simply, exaptation is about adapting to the unknown. The adaptive features that have not undergone selective pressure, but they play an adaptive role in an unknown future scenario. Difficult to explain, but these 3 things, autopoiesis and exaptation, some may call coincidence, some may call serendipity, but others argue that these are properties of life. And I do think they are. Now, what I believe in is that these 3 unconscious properties of life to anticipate, human beings can turn them conscious. We can be stem cells of a wounded planet. We can plant trees. We can regenerate the earth. We can be autopoietic. We can create conditions for more life to appear, human or non-human. And we can be exaptive. With our science, with all the different sciences that there are, we can prepare ourselves for the unknown, and the future is always unknown. So anticipation, I think, is one important thing for us to think about. It leads me, the unconscious ways that life anticipates, leads me to think that we do not have life. We often, oh, my life. No, it's not your life. You don't have life. Life has you. It's just the opposite. And if we think like that, I believe that it's an important first step for us to feel part of a whole. Which I think is essential for this transformative change we are talking about. So, regenerative anticipation, we've been working on this concept. We believe that if we regenerate the fractures, spiritual fractures, physical fractures that there are in Gaia, that they are in the planet, we may be able to anticipate better futures. And this anticipation has to be very imaginative. So take a look at this painting, Albert Robida, 1902. This people leaving the opera in the year 2000. So he was 100 years before thinking what would be the future of transportation, especially, and in the operas. So Albert Robidard's future has flying cars. You may not be able to see because of the light, but if you look at the way people are dressed, it tells me two things. That the social differences are going to be the same 100 years afterwards. There are going to be these rich people going in their flying cars to the opera and to the restaurants. And the opera would not become popular. It would be only something that the rich people go to. So he's not very imaginative. The only thing that he imagined was the cars would fly. But all the way society is structured would be pretty much the same. So anticipation calls for imagination enhancement. And how we've been doing that in practice, and these are some of the things that we do in our practical work there in the UNESCO chair and the Museum of Tomorrow. We are very interested in dialogues, and I think it's another feature of modernity. We think of problems, and then we imagine that for problems we have solutions. And we tend to forget that to go from problem to solution, we need to dialogue, because solutions are supposed to be collective. So we've been investing a lot in dialogues, and I'll give you two examples. This one down here is a project developed by an NGO in Rio called ISER, is an Institute of Religious Studies. It's more than 50 years old NGO now, and they have a project called Faith in Climate. So they get some of us climate scientists and biodiversity scientists to talk with more than 40 different indigenous religious leaders of more than 40 different religions, and we go and talk to them about climate change and what science is saying, and they tell us how their religions perceive climate change. And it's been an amazing experience. I've been engaged with that for the past 7-8 years now. And it's very challenging. I can tell you more details on that later. And that's another project that we have. Is promoted by a publisher in Rio called Dantes, Editora. It's called Selvagem, Ciclo de Estudos. Selvagem means wild in English. And it's a study cycle that connects indigenous peoples. And Ailton Krenak is a Brazilian important indigenous leader. Ailton is the master of ceremonies, and it has dialogues with scientists like Katia here from ICMBio, like Pajé do Abussan, philosopher Emmanuel Kocha. So it makes dialogues with people that have different ways of interpreting reality and life. We also we have a lot of partnerships with our artist friends. That's a plant that I have studied some years ago, a plant that we argue that is one of the such stem cells of the planet that has autopoietic properties and also an exaptive history, and that has inspired painters and sculptor. That's Ernesto Neto. He makes some larger-than-life sculptures out of crochet. That's in Zurich train station, and some of his work of art, he takes people to populate these works of art, and we hold discussions with the general public on several aspects related to life, and we have a Buddhist monk, we have Brazilian indigenous people, and there are farmers and scientists and artists and so on. That Sebastião Salgado is a well-known photographer. He's Brazilian, but based in France, and he's been doing a lot of work in the Amazon, and also Sebastião has been helping bringing art to the sustainability discussion and to the fight against deforestation. These are some of the exercises we do. See Victoria, your new friend here. This we do Futures Literacy Labs, and I can also explain that later, but it's very much about the present, because as I said, the future does not exist. But these are exercises that enhance our imagination. And we have a research team. We are looking into ancestral futures. We are very interested in Afrofuturism and the similarities and differences between US Afrofuturism, Brazilian, and in Africa. The notion of seeds of a good Anthropocene, Professor Laura Pereira and others have been developing that, and we find it extremely interesting. And also working on post-development. These are these various different alternative views for the future that I mentioned, Ubuntu and ecofeminism, especially, are some that our team is looking into. And these dialogues, I think, every time we think of dialogues to solve problems, we tend to, we still embrace the notion developed by Hegel that for a given thesis you have an antithesis, and the thesis confronted with the antithesis leads you to a synthesis. I like more Platonic dialectic. Plato argues that dialectic is a therapy to the soul that leads to knowledge, overcoming pathological ignorance. What he wants to say with that is that in every dialogue and discussion, you don't need to reach agreement. You don't need to become the other. It can happen. It can lead to fusion, it can lead to hybridization, but dialectic is something that can simply make different ideas coexist. One doesn't need to overrule, as long as they are loving and democratic. They don't need to massacre the other one. So I like this notion better. And for that, I think Nikolai Roerich is another interesting character. He was a geologist by training, spiritualist, and also an artist, a painter. And Roerich, in the 30s, 1931, he proposed a pact that works of art in the event of war would not be destroyed. This pact was signed, but it didn't help much during the World War. We know how much of the works of art were lost. Roerich, he designed this flag. It's the flag of peace and culture, and the motto is that wherever there's peace, there's culture. Wherever there's culture, there's peace. And the flag, the symbol is the outer circle is culture, and inside you have arts, spirituality, and science. The circle is also peace. The outer circle is also peace, and the inner circles are love, forgiveness, and tolerance. So this flag is to be raised everywhere in the world that there's education and culture on July 25th. We largely forget that, and we are in a campaign to have this flag out there in schools, museums, every 25th of July, just to remember that to have peace, you gotta have culture. To have culture, you gotta have peace. So take-home message 2, regeneration is both a state of mind and an emerging paradigm that anticipates the emergence of sustainable futures. And then finally, how we take all that out to education, formal and informal, the arts, help out, and digital. So sustainability, communication of sustainability can be about sustainability, can be of sustainability. So company reports, for instance, or ESG and all that, they make reports, and it's to talk about the state of sustainability of a given enterprise. It can also be communication for sustainability. So sustainability communication became a whole field of inquiry and research, and it's, of course, very challenging. So to start off, what sustainability are we going to communicate? The one on the SDG, or this ethic of care that I'm talking about, or any other type? In which languages? We saw yesterday some of the discussion about the language barriers. And a lot of the UN language, there are 6 main ones, but well, Portuguese, for instance, is not there. So there's, you know, there are problems with this large-scale communication. So there's a lot to be done. Formal education is one such ways, and I like very much this definition of Paulo Freire. Education is about critical thinking. It's critical thinking about conditions of existence and the actions that transform these very conditions. So education, by definition of Brazilian education philosopher Paulo Freire, is transformative by definition. Now, if you think of the schools you went to, if you think of the university experience you have had, if you think of these past 10 days, which of these various experiences you find more transformative? Was it the long days at school? Do you think the school as it is nowadays, it remains, does it have a transformative power? Have you been seeing curricular change regularly? Are we learning about wholeness, or they are teaching us modules? We carry on studying biology or physics or sociology, and we don't necessarily learn about the other one, even at graduate level. So I do believe we have a problem there with formal. If it is to be transformative, we do have a problem. And of course, there's a huge variation inside countries, between countries, and all that. So formal education is for sure an important vehicle to discuss sustainability and transformative change. It's transformative by definition, but we somehow are not doing it. That's why I'm very interested in informal education, and museums are the place for that. You can do anything inside the museum. Museums are safe spaces for you to discuss dangerous things, I guess. You can do anything inside the museum. It's very open. So it makes education flow. And there's a new definition of museums that was promoted by the ICOM. That's the international network of museums, and I quite like it. What I think that's important to see is that museums are to be accessible and inclusive, and they foster diversity and sustainability. That's what museums are about. If this definition is correct, and if we practice that, museums are no longer a thing of the past. Museums are about the future. And most of all, about the present. Even if they hold historical collections, or if they have a futures proposition, as ours in Rio, museums are to make us reflect and discuss about the planetary challenges, how we can do such transformative change. And perhaps we can do that at faster speed than the formal education can. That's a view of the Museum of Tomorrow in Rio. I hope whoever has not been there yet, you are most welcome to come and visit. That's another one that I find fascinating. If you have the time, go there close to Belo Horizonte, this museum called Inhotim. It's a collection of art galleries in the middle of Botanical Garden, or Botanical Garden in the middle of art galleries. Is the dialogue between nature and arts is unbelievable. It made me change completely my view about modern art and about nature just by visiting this museum. I strongly recommend. And then finally, digitalization. We cannot escape that. These are the two imperatives, I think, of the 21st century. These are things we cannot get away from. We need to be more sustainable. Everybody's looking into that. And the world is going digital. And digitalization and sustainability, they have a strange relationship. Right? To have all these machines that we use, you need a lot of water. You need a lot of minerals. The production of that's not particularly sustainable. But on the other hand, if we use well the digital tools, we can reduce a lot our impact on the world. Now, how to do it? And, we often discuss, oh, I don't like technology. I don't like digital. Too bad. It's an imperative. You are going to have to deal with it. The question is, how can we use that for better purposes? Right? How can we use this digital world to put people in contact in a positive way? How can we use that not to fight, but to have new ideas, to connect, to really connect the planet? And they put down here the psychosphere compete for the technosphere, because that's a research we have done during the pandemic years. There's a Brazilian geographer, passed away too, Milton Santos, here from USP in São Paulo. Milton Santos was Afro-Brazilian, one of the first persons to talk deeply about globalization. And Santos, he developed this notion of that the technosphere, or the technical apparatus that we put in the world, comes with the capital, along with it. But the psychosphere, which is the psychology of a given territory, it kind of competes for this technology. What we saw during the pandemic, and we did a small research on that, it's a paper that's soon to come out. What happened in Brazil is that a lot about our indigenous people and local knowledge was out on the web, and people were using it in a speed never seen before. Many of what's going on today, recently we have had Ailton Krenak that I just showed to you. He's now in the Brazilian Academy of Literature. First indigenous person of Brazil to join the academy, to be invited to the academy. Ailton has written several books, but he was mostly seen and heard during the pandemic through the web. Not only Ailton, but a number of other features. So I think that that's the psychosphere competing for the technological space. And that's good. We can use it for good purposes. I like very much, I was talking yesterday to Aurelio about this philosopher I like very much, Teilhard de Chardin. In the 40s, he wrote this beautiful book called The Future of Man. And Chardin was a Jesuit and a scientist too. And he thought that through the technosphere, the biosphere would reach the noosphere. The noosphere is the sphere of knowledge. Chardin was such an optimist that he thought that he said that through the magical powers of television and radio, we are going to be so much connected to one another that we are going to develop telepathy. And then he said, we will be in such state of harmony, and that's where he tried to connect science with religion, that Jesus is not going to come down to earth. We are going to go up to Jesus, through the noosphere, to this sphere of knowledge. It's like unbelievable. When you are depressed, read Chardin. It's really motivational about the future of mankind, of humankind. So I do believe we can do that. We can do technology, we can use technology for good purposes of sustainability. Then the final message, formal education is outpaced by other communication and outreach formats. This is therefore a territory of dispute. And then we must take a lot of care with our education. And then we can think of futures of education. Why do we need certificates? Why do we need diplomas? Why do we need to follow specific careers? Why can't we do whichever disciplines we want during our university day training? We can get free of all this paperwork and learn whatever we want. Is this a possible future? I think it is. It depends on us. And I guess that to finalize, for me, the principle of hope nurtures the spirit of utopia. And to build active hope in days that the present is so hard is very, very difficult. And then I think hope is something that we need to practice. And then I think moments like that, they bring me hope. What my friends here are doing to get you all together, to bring us here, tells me about the power that our species has on the planet. And it's a constructive power. We can help life become even more beautiful than it already is. If we get together, if we dream together, and especially if we let the good things emerge. Thank you so much. Cheers. Thank you.